We're now on week 3 of our summer reading series. This week, looking at Ode magazine. I didn't find out until the coffee hour last week that some of you thought I meant O magazine. So if you have been chowing down on Oprah over the last week, my apologies. Although Oprah can be just as inspirational, I think, as Ode magazine, it is the latter that we will be visiting today. Next week, we're looking at World War Z, an oral history to the zombie wars. It didn't occur to me when I chose that book that I would be speaking on it 2 days after Scott and I moved house at the end of a 4-month-long challenge, and one that will no doubt turn me into a zombie by next Sunday. So you might be challenged to take on the zombie wars yourself when you come next week. The week after that, however, should see us all back together as we look at About Grace by Anthony Doerr. Both of them excellent books. But this week, I steeped myself in Ode magazine, a very different week than the one I had last week when I looked at Tikkun. Tikkun magazine, as I spoke last week, is one that sets you right up against many of the challenges that America, which is the magazine's country in which it is situated, but also the world face issues around politics, spirituality, social justice, and the world at large, and issues that very often weigh our hearts so heavily that it's hard to see how we would ever get out from underneath them. But Ode magazine offers us a different way of looking at things. Last week, we placed on the table at front of us a geode. A geode is a rock that on one side of it isn't very attractive, it's just a rock. But when it's broken, because of the way that it was spewed into the world and cooled so much more quickly on the outside than on the inside, when it's broken, you can see how that process has undergone, has created within it crystals, striations, color. And the geode rests on the communion table as a result of some of the conversations that we're in here at West Hill. It's not always that things look pretty. On the outside, things can sometimes look pretty horrible. And as one person remarked about some of the work that's undergoing here, some of the realities that we're facing at West Hill, it sometimes feels like the church is on fire and there's no one here to help put it out. There's just not enough energy, not enough focus, not enough staff support, not enough financial resources, not enough to actually put that fire out. And so on the outside it looks kind of ugly, but when you look on the inside of a geode, as when you look on the inside of this community of faith, you see incredible pieces of beauty, of hope, of opportunity, of relationships that are strong and rich and healthy that pull us through difficult times, and we hope will pull us through the difficult time that this congregation currently faces. And so Ode magazine is kind of like that geode in a world that is filled with all kinds of challenges, a cacophony of issues, most of them numbing in their enormity. Ode magazine pulls these little threads out that indicate places of hope and places of beauty. The song talk about beautiful things a little bit. The way actually I introduced it, saying that it wasn't very clear, but I think that illustrated beautifully the cacophony that attacks us every day, and what you could make out of what the singer was offering, where it's just a word here and there, and almost all of them were about disastrous things, about illness and disease and violence and crime and loss and death, and a magnitude of concerns faces us in the course of our everyday. And even if we're focusing on things that attend to our own personal lives, making our relationships strong and healthy, keeping a home that is ecologically sensitive, trying to do the right thing, we're still blasted by these words on the newspapers that line the streets and the television news blasts that hit us and the advertising that we see that tells us what we don't have and what it is that we need. We're constantly being attacked, and as the singer at the beginning of the song says, "Stop ruining my day. I don't want to hear all that stuff." So read Ode magazine, and you'll get to hear some of the bright side of life. Not that it's all, cherries and roses. There's lots of stuff in Ode magazine that challenges the way that we think and that offers us ideas on how the world could operate differently if we would only think a little bit differently as well. But it does bring a positive spin to many of those same issues that lock us down and shut us down in a place of immobility. It offers us those ribbons of possibility that pull us out of that isolation and help us to act in positive ways. The first time I spoke about an article that I'd read in Ode was many years ago, and it focused on the work of Simon Berkowitz and Pim van Lommel, a cardiac surgeon in the Netherlands. Van Lommel's work as a cardiac surgeon put him in relationship with people who had had a lot of near-death experiences. Well, not people who had had a lot of them, a lot of people who had had near-death experiences. And his understanding of what was happening was so piqued, his curiosity was piqued because he could see that people were really able to identify things that had happened around them when technically they were really very dead. And so he started exploring that and started working with Simon Berkowitz, who's a computer programmer and who could understand a lot about the brain. And the two of them came up with this incredible theory about how the brain isn't where any of our memories are, that they're stored in this kind of electromagnetic place around us, and that our DNA is kind of like the tuning dial that tunes us into our own particular memories. Yours are tuned into some other one, and yours to some other one, and so we tune our channels to who we are. It makes you question what happens in heart transplants and skin transplants and stuff when the tuning gets off and the memories, if you walked by the person that had donated skin after your real burn, would you suddenly experience all of their memories because your skin would be tuning into their frequency? It was an interesting idea, and the article was led off by saying, where is the soul? Is the soul really outside of us rather than something that is within? And if it is something outside of us, how do we care for it, and what happens to us after we do die? A question that has Van Lommel continuing with his curious speculations. But this issue of Ode follows a difficult period in the life of the magazine. For the last couple of years, it has not actually published print copies. It's been sending them out electronically because it, too, has been experiencing dramatic financial difficulties. And so when I received my first paper copy of the magazine this past month, I was delighted to see that perhaps they were pulling themselves out of the challenges that they had been facing. Magazines that just tell you all the bad stuff that's happening and all the gossip about who's doing what and focus on celebrities breaking down and their relationships breaking down and alcohol and drug abuse, but they seem to be able to survive no problem at all. But a magazine that wants to tell us about the good things that are happening in the world ends up in having problems. But this month's magazine has a number of things in it, each of them sort of walking that center place between the gravity of a situation and the total ignoring of a situation, and tries to bring us to a place where we can have a dialogue, where possibility resides, where we can do things that will make a difference. The lead article is about climate change and suggests that we need to stop worrying about climate change in a way that challenges us to change our lifestyles, that asks us to mitigate climate change, to reduce global warming by reducing our footprint, by turning down our thermostats in the winter and turning them up in the summer, by recycling and selling our cars and doing all those kinds of things that extremists would suggest. Instead, the author suggests that we should adapt, that we should find some way to figure out what's going to be coming and make sure that we're ready for it, and that we make ourselves ready for climate upheaval, for the monsoons if you live in a monsoon area, for earthquakes if you live in an earthquake area, for forest fires in a place where those run rampant. And learn to use technology and develop new technologies so that we can ride the wave of climate change and global warming instead of just trying to stop it, because the word about town is it's not going to be stopped. And so the author tells us of a number of ways that people are doing that and offers us a little bit of hope in the process, offers us the opportunity to be responsive in ways that can be positive and that can help future generations also cope with some of the challenges of climate change. Some of the other things that the magazine this particular month spoke about was the realities that are being experienced by those who live in Africa. We in the First World hear about incredible stories of rising populations, incredible devastation of the population by AIDS, the economic challenges, the lack of food, lack of schooling, lack of everything. But in the magazine, it lifts up some of the economic growth that's being seen in some of the poorest areas of Africa, and suggests that because of the work that's happening on the ground there, the innovative projects, the recognition of how people can find sustainable employment in rural areas rather than in cities, and the move to support that the desire to reduce poverty by 50% in Africa, which is one of the Millennium Goals, might actually be achieved by 2017. 2 years off target, but achieved, something that many of us have thought wouldn't happen at all. It's a positive place to set your perspective as we're talking about the challenges of supporting a whole continent that struggles with incredible dissonance in the wealth and poverty, access to resources and lack of resources, and we find a way to create some middle ground between those two. So it's an opportunity for us to see some hope there. Denis Diderot is mentioned in one of the articles by Amy Dominy, who tells a story about how Diderot was given a beautiful dressing gown once, a beautiful, I think it was red dressing gown. And it was so gorgeous that he thought he needed to change the chair that he sat in to reflect the beauty and elegance and luxury of the dressing gown that he had been given as a gift. And fairly soon, the carpet had to change because the chair just looked too brand new on the carpet. And then the desk and all the furnishings in the room. And the study eventually, over the course of time, became a reflection of this incredibly exquisite dressing gown that Diderot had been given as a gift. But when he entered it one day, he looked at it and he thought, I don't even belong here. It wasn't his study at all. And Dominy uses the story to suggest to us that we too can find ways to end up in a totally different life that we never would have recognized was our own, one step at a time. Only she recognizes that she did it in a positive way by buying ice cream at Ben & Jerry's a couple of decades ago, when Ben & Jerry's was the first ice cream company to use organic ingredients. And when she read about the organic ingredients, she went and started looking to find out a little bit more about organic ingredients. And soon she was buying nothing but organic food, and then shifting her diet so that it became predominantly vegetarian-based, and then shifting lifestyle to match that. And as Diderot, she would walk into her life one day, she knows she'll walk in and go, whoa, this is like not the who I was, but is it the who I can be? Is it the who I am? And she finds that she has actually grown into the comfort of that new dressing gown because her life now has taken on a deeper and richer meaning. So she's suggesting to us that as consumers, we find our way forward to consume in ways that are positive, ways that make change. Some of the links that take you off the Ode magazine website to other sites, and I've suggested that that's a good thing and a bad thing at times. But there's one site that I thought was particularly worth mentioning, and that's wearewhatwedo.org. We Are What We Do is mentioned in in the magazine because it's suggesting, as Amy Domini's article does, that we become the people that we are, that we reflect who we are by what we consume and what it is that we do in the world. And We Are What We Do is a website upon which you can post what it is that you do to make a difference in the world, and you can get a whole bunch of really great ideas too. One of them struck me as a very simple one, and one that would be very easy for me. Many of you perhaps don't know, but most of the clothes I wear come from Goodwill. I have a fabulous Goodwill store in Sarasota, Florida that I frequent as often as I can. No, but Goodwill shopping is one of the things that I love to do. So the author of that suggestion on wearewhatwedo.org suggests that you pay a little bit more to the charity that is selling the goods. So if you find something that you really like and you go up and you say, how much is this? And they say $2.50. You say, well, you take $5 for it. They go, excuse me? It's $2.50, and actually it's Half Price Friday today, so it's only $1.25. Yeah, what would you take $5 for it? Imagine the effect you would have on someone's day if you did that, and the next person in line, and the person after that. The ripple effect could be amazing. Little ideas like that. Another one that was listed on the site is when you're going grocery shopping, knock on the door of the person who lives across the apartment hallway, or a senior that lives down the street, or someone who has 2 small children at home and is doing everything that they can, as they say on the site, to keep the one's finger out of the socket, the electrical socket, and the other one from rolling themselves off the counter. Ask them, say, I'm going shopping. Do you have a list? I'll get your groceries for you. Somebody actually did that for Scott and I this week. Got our groceries for us, made our day, and much of the week beautifully, much more beautiful than it might have been without that. But these little things that we can do that are opportunities to make our lives better shine out from Ode Magazine, from its sponsors, and from the many links that come from it. The questions that Ruth, can I have those questions? I usually have them on this sheet, but they're not here. The questions that Ruth read today were also linked to Ode Magazine, one of the Ode Magazine contributors. And I wanted to take you through a little bit of a thought experiment. There's something called the Vanna White syndrome that I think was coined by Ted Koppel in a university graduation address that he gave many years ago. Vanna White, who is the person who I think turns the letters on Jeopardy, everybody knows exactly who she's like. Somebody's shaking her head. On Wheel of Fortune, thank you. On Wheel of Fortune. You can tell I don't watch it a lot. But Vanna White, I know Vanna White, and I know that Vanna White would like everything that I like. And that's what Ted Koppel is saying, that when we don't know people, we tend to project onto them ourselves, our own understanding of ourselves. And so we expect them to be just like we are. And if we were to actually get in a conversation with them, we might be quite shocked to find out that they were someone completely different, And so that's the syndrome, is our projection of ourselves on everyone that we don't know. But I'm going to ask you to project, not yourself, but to assume that you know what someone would do or what they would say in response to these questions. And the people that I want you to think about are the people that we think of as the great spiritual leaders of human history. Jesus and Buddha and Confucius and Gandhi. What do you think they would say if they were asked these questions? Not projecting just what we think, but what do you think they would say if we asked them these questions? What aspirations do you have for your life that, if pursued, could provide the preamble for more passion, inspiration, and transformation in your life and the world you live in? If we asked that of some of those great spiritual giants of human history, if we were to say, what do you hope for yourself? That if you did that, it's going to create this inspiration in the world. The things that they said might be quite revealing. And they might tell us why we see them as great spiritual leaders down through the course of history. Do those dreams, desires, gifts, skills, talents enhance and elevate the resilience you have to your own inner wisdom and the service you could provide to the one greater earth community? If we think about the stories that we're raised with, stories about Jesus, or if we were raised in a different faith tradition, stories about the Bab or stories about Buddha, can we think about how those aspirations that they had contributed to making the world a different place? And how can those visions and aspirations be synchronized in solidarity and kinship with others? When we see the lives of those who have offered themselves to the spiritual enrichment of the world, eventually, we can find that they gave themselves to those individual relationships first. They gave themselves to the people around them. They offered a depth to their own personal relationships. And it's because of that they have become known down through the ages as these great spiritual leaders. I don't think any of them set out to be a great spiritual leader. I think they set out to change the way they were in relationship with the individuals around them. And so they changed the world. And so I was inspired by another one of the links on Ode magazine, because it brings us sort of to that reason for doing what we do and that soothing that I spoke about last week. Not that we're going to be great spiritual leaders, but that we can be attentive to those things and those individual relationships in ways that do change the world around us, and perhaps eventually, if the whole generation were to get it, the world for all time. Alan Lux, who was the executive director of Big Brothers and Big Sisters in New York, wrote a book about what happens when you do good, what happens to you, and how that's a positive experience. We tend to sometimes speak badly of or belittle those who do good for themselves. You know, oh, they're only doing it so that they can get all the attention, or they only do that because it makes them feel good. They don't do it for altruistic reasons. But the reality is you can't separate doing it for altruistic reasons from the benefit that it gives you, because you're going to get that benefit. You're going to get the high, you're going to get the feel better, you're going to get a whole lot going on in you. So unless you cut yourself off entirely from the effect of what you're doing good does, you're going to be in a cycle of doing good and feeling better, doing good and feeling better, doing good and feeling better. So these are the things that Alan Lux talks about in his book, some of the significant findings of his research. Helping others contributes to the maintenance of good health and can diminish the effect of minor and serious psychological and physical diseases and disorders. A fairly major reason, a major response. The rush of euphoria, often referred to as a helper's high, that's when you say, I know, but would you take $5 for it? That rush of euphoria after performing a kind act involves physical sensations and the release of the body's natural painkillers, the endorphins. The initial rush is followed by a longer period of calm and improved emotional well-being. The health benefits and sense of well-being return for hours or even days whenever the helping act is remembered. So you do something good, and you think about it later on, and you have the same positive effect. Stress-related health problems improve after performing kind acts. Helping others reverses feelings of depression, supplies social contact, reduces feelings of hostility and isolation that can cause stress, overeating, ulcers, etc., decreases the constriction in the lungs that lead to asthma attacks. Do something good. Make yourself feel better. Helping can enhance feelings of joyfulness, emotional resilience, and vigor, and can reduce the unhealthy sense of isolation. Hi, I'm going shopping. Can I get your groceries for you? We connect with people. You make relationships sacred, and you end up experiencing benefits for yourself. The awareness and intensity of physical pain can actually decrease. Attitudes such as chronic hostility, and I know none of us have that negatively arouse and damage the body are reduced. And it's important we learn that anger is a bad thing. You know, it's one of the 7 deadly sins, as is noted in one of the articles in Ode. It's hard on our bodies. We're supposed to suppress it. But the author challenges us to differentiate between anger, which is our response to something that's happening in the present, and rage, which is an ongoing residual effect to stuff that's happened in the past or that happens on a regular basis. And anger and rage are two different things, and it's extremely important that we deal with anger. And as we deal with anger, we move ourselves through to a place of change. You say something nasty to me, I call you on it, and immediately we're in a different place. Greg has never said anything nasty to me, by the way. But when I got the email that I got this week, I responded, and we now have a dialogue going on, which is helpful. A sense of self-worth, greater happiness, and optimism is increased, and feelings of helplessness and depression decrease. When we establish an affiliative connection with someone, a relationship of friendship, love, or some sort of positive bonding, we feel emotions that can strengthen the immune system. Caring for strangers leads to immense immune and healing benefits, and regular club attendance, volunteering, entertaining, or faith group attendance is the happiness equivalent of getting a college degree or more than doubling your income. Those are pretty amazing benefits. Now, one of the concerns about that is that as our connection with the internet increases, we are developing our brains in ways that respond to a variety of situations in a faster, we have a shorter response time, we're able to carry more ideas in our head at the same time, and so we're able to process problems a lot faster. We're able to retain facts and information and think of younger generations and what they have going on in their heads, their exposure to the internet and to all that kind of information. That's growing a part of their brain that doesn't have much to do with being kind. It has a lot to do with being smart and problem solving and all of that. But the part of our brain that cares for other people, that offers an empathic response, that helps us to be kind to one another, and so in that kindness create of our generation a spiritual giant, that part of our brain requires a different response. It requires different action, different activity, different interaction. And so it's important as we move into a more virtual space where we're relating with one another by email and over the internet and posting everything we own in the cloud, we have to be attentive to being kind and to teaching our children to be kind and to expect that others be kind in a way that allows them then to be kind. It's an important and very serious element of our community that we, as a faith community, have the responsibility for sharing in the broader community. Mostly because most other organizations aren't going to do it in the same kind of way that faith communities can do it. So Ode magazine sends us on a journey of discovery toward beautiful things. We can find beauty in the ideas, the creativity, the passions of those who write for Ode magazine. But they teach us that we can find that beauty in ourselves, and that it is to ourselves that we have to look as we find ways to be kind, ways to build relationships, ways to ripple that out beyond our own circle of friends into a community in need beyond us. And so let's talk about beautiful things a little bit, and perhaps from those little conversations change the whole world. Let us pray. We give thanks for the opportunity to have our hearts, our spirits lifted by those beautiful things that are pointed to by people who have passion and energy and vision, and whose creative response is to offer beauty into the world. May we pick up those threads of beauty at every opportunity and weave them into the beauty that is the human community. May we wrap it with such awe, such love, such beauty, that it passes through each individual and down through the generations. It passes on a desire to be kind, a sense of well-being that grows from that kindness, and a confidence that all will be treated with respect and dignity. This we pray as those who have taken the first steps, yet will always be on the journey. Amen.